This video is based on a 2010 SIP Airstream, but I'd assume these instructions would pretty much apply to all compressors within this price range, such as the Clark, Sealy, SGS, etc. SIP say to change the oil after the first 100 hours and then every 300 hours after that. I'd assume for the average keen amateur this might be seen to be a yearly job. We don't need many tools to do this job, and the following is pretty much all you need. 1 litre of SIP Air Compressor oil, a 19mm spanner for the filler plug, a 6mm Allen key for the drain plug, yes, an empty plastic milk container to catch old oil and a funnel, technically a torque wrench for 22 Newton meters, and some cloths for spillages. So this is the oil I'll be using, which is the SIP Advanced Piston Compressor Oil, and you can get that in 5 litres or the smaller 1 litre. And then we need a 6mm hex Allen key, a 19mm spanner, a milk container to do a bit of DIY with, because this will help us drain the oil into the container, and then a thin funnel for refilling the oil. And lastly, a label just to say when we change the oil. Now time for some craft work with our scissors. Now this might seem quite an odd thing to make while trying to do an oil change on an air compressor, but if you see it through, it actually does make a bit of sense, because that 6mm Allen key is used to undo the sump plug, as it were, and that oil tends to just go everywhere, and it will start dripping down the side of the tank, underneath the compressor unit, literally everywhere. So by popping this underneath, it helps us catch that oil as it's coming out, and then we can redirect it into our little catch container. So I'll just punch the hole there so the oil can come through that. We can also put the Allen key up that to undo the sump plug. Okay, there we go. Now might be a good time to just familiarise ourselves with the main parts of an air compressor before we get started. So here we can see the compressor in yellow, the motor in red, and the air storage tank in blue. Here is the drive belt cover in green, the run and start capacitors in yellow, the non-return valve in red, and the air pressure switch in orange. And the bit that mostly concerns us today is in blue, the oil level window, in yellow, the drain plug, and in red is the oil filler neck. So this is the purpose of the milk container, to help avoid spillage of oil. Anyway, put that to one side. I'm just going to loosen the filler plug with the 19mm spanner, and I'm also just going to loosen the drain plug so that I know that it will come out when I come to do it. Ideally, the oil needs to be hot. Hot oil is thinner and runnier. This will help to flush out any debris as we drain the oil. For this reason, I will run the compressor from empty to full to warm it. So we'll definitely speed this part up. This will be pretty monotonous. So we just got to get it to 10 bar, which is 145 psi, and then the oil should be a little bit thinner, like so. We can now drain the old oil out. Okay, so disconnect the power, definitely don't want that on. Make sure the machine's switched off. I'm going to remove the filler cap so the air can get in, no vacuum forming. I'm going to just loosen that 6mm Allen drain plug. Get my can ready, my funnel's in position now, and I should be able to just unwind it, pull out the sump plug. Hopefully the copper washer will come out with it, which it didn't. Quickly get that bolt out, and now it's going to drain. Now if that was warmer, that would obviously drain a lot quicker. So that oil didn't really get warmed up. You can see the copper washer just there, so make sure you don't lose that copper washer. And you can see some of the black in the oil, which could be fine metal particles or something from wear on the machine. As you can see, it is quite a messy job. You definitely want some cloths on the ground. Got a nice little black line there coming from the sump of the compressor, and there's that copper washer. Oil does seem quite cold actually. So before we lose that copper washer, I'm just going to fish that out, because that is quite an important seal. That's what actually seals and stops the oil from coming out. So I can now put the sump plug back in with the copper washer and then remove my homemade funnel. Now without that funnel, when I first did this on this compressor, which was about 10 years ago, I found that some of the oil would come out the front, and then without me knowing, some of the oil was actually creeping backwards underneath the compressor unit and then dripping down inside that metal framework, making an absolute mess everywhere. So this does seem to be a tidier way of collecting that oil. Now technically the Airmate sump bolt should be torqued to 22 Newton meters. So for the sake of accuracy, I will torque it to 22 Newton meters, though it's basically not very tight at all. So it's just gentle hand tightness. So we can now take a look at the oil that came out, and it's nearly a litre, but there was a little bit of spillage involved. Time to refill with some nice clean oil. Okay, I'm just going to check that my compressor's level, because the floor in my garage is definitely not level. So I'm just going to use a chock there to make sure it's level. That way when I check the oil in the viewing window, I can make sure it's definitely correct. Otherwise I'm going to get a higher reading than it really is. So this is the viewing window, and the oil should be on the red dot, or just above the red dot. So that looks about correct. So I'm happy with that. So we can pop that back out now. Check the rubber seal is on our filler cap. Pop that on. And I like to now pop a service label on so I know when I last changed the oil. So it's simple enough to do, just to pop a little label on there so that we know when that oil was changed. There we go. And also don't forget to drain the water from the air tank on a regular basis. So thank you for watching, and hope this video helped you in the maintenance of your compressor. This video was filmed and edited by me, Mark Savage, in January 2021.